not only massive, but increasingly modernized, is poised for a cross-strait invasion of Taiwan.
I think you're forgetting that
and what do our leadership...
We have the largest military in the world. We spend over $1 trillion every year. And the state, your state of Missouri, is over half the people are in poverty. China is not our enemy. The climate crisis is. We need to be this serious about the climate crisis. We need diplomacy in Ukraine and with China. We are continuing to have more aggression with China, and we are spending more on our military than 100 countries combined. The climate crisis is our common threat.
It's interesting. This administration wants to use the climate crisis as a justification for its agenda in Ukraine and elsewhere. Maybe they ought to visit with that gal.
All right, guys. So as you just saw there, Josh Hawley was interrupted while discussing the threat that China poses to the United States by a climate alarmist who's claiming that China is not the real threat, that climate change is the real threat. Okay, we shouldn't be so antagonistic towards China because the real enemy is climate change. Allegedly, right? Apparently, this person doesn't know or understand that China is the world's largest polluter. Okay, so if you're really trying to fight climate change, maybe you should be fighting China, because again, nobody pumps more CO2 into the atmosphere than China, right? But again, the wokes, for whatever reason, they're silent on China. Okay, they want the United States and the Western countries to do all the legwork when it comes to fighting climate change, the alleged climate change, instead of actually going and taking on the #1 polluter in the world, China, which is required to actually do anything at all about the alleged climate change. And that brings me to this recent Senate hearing on climate in the budget, in which John Kennedy questioned some climate scientists on this issue of how can we afford to make the U.S. carbon neutral by 2050, how much would it cost, and what effect would it have on global temperatures. And unsurprisingly, none of these scientists had any answers when asked about, okay, what are we going to get for a $50 trillion investment into making the U.S. carbon neutral by 2050? Take a look.
Dr. Litterman, how much will it cost to make the United States of America carbon neutral by 2050?
I don't know, sir.
So you're advocating we do these things, but you don't know the ultimate cost?
Yes, absolutely. I certainly don't know the ultimate cost, and it's very uncertain. It depends on innovations. It depends on.
I understand. I'm just trying to lay a foundation here to understand your expert testimony. Dr. Holtz-Eakin, do you know how much it will cost to make the United States of America carbon neutral by 2050?
Depends how you do it. If we do it all in the federal budget with directed things, it'll be
public
super
and private
expensive.
Dollars.
Sorry?
Public and private dollars. It's ultimately private dollars anyway.
Yeah, I agree.
So how much?
You're going to look at $50 trillion.
$50 trillion. Yeah. Okay, thank you. If we make the United States of America carbon neutral by 2050 by spending $50 trillion, which you're advocating, I gather.
No.
Okay. Then strike that last part. I'm wrong. You're not advocating. You're advocating something.
If you're going to do something, do something smart. That's what I advocated.
Okay. If we spend $50 trillion to make the United States of America carbon neutral by 2050, how much will that lower world temperatures?
I can't answer that because we don't know what China and India and the rest of the globe has done.
Okay. Have you heard anybody from the Biden administration say how much it will lower world temperatures?
No.
Does anybody know how much it will lower world temperatures? No?
No one can know for sure.
Okay. Dr. Litterman.
Yes.
If we spend $50 trillion, or however much it takes, to make the United States carbon neutral by 2050? How much will it lower world temperatures?
Senator, that depends on the rest of the world. We have to work with the rest of the world. We're in this together.
Well,
it's one world. We can't build
if-
a wall around the United States and say,
what if we spend $50 trillion, Europe cooperates, most Western democracies cooperate, but India and China don't? How much will our $50 trillion lower world temperature?
we're in this together. Senator, we have to get the world to work together.
How much? I get that.
Okay.
How much will it lower world temperatures?
If China and India do not help.
Yes.
I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah. So as you saw there, that was Senator Kennedy masterfully dissecting these climate scientists on the fact that, look, you guys want us to go out and spend $50 trillion to fight climate change, but yet you don't know what the result will be. You don't know if it's actually going to work. Now, if you guys, ever work for a company or anything like that, in corporate finance, they have this thing that they do where they call, valuations, right, on certain projects, okay? And there's different types of models and stuff like that that you can use to basically guess, okay, what you're going to get out of a certain project, okay? No big company will spend millions or billions of dollars. In this case, we're talking about the government spending trillions of dollars to do something and not know, or at least have some idea of what the effect is going to be. Even if it's bull, right? Even if it's, not accurate, they're going to say, hey, based off this model or whatever, this is what we think we're going to get. This is our return on investment. These guys can't even give us any idea of what our return on investment will be for spending $50 trillion for the U.S. to go carbon neutral, because China, right, has to cooperate for this to work, right? Which, again, presents the biggest problem, right? Why should we nuke our own economy? Why should we drive our country into a $50 trillion worth of debt that ultimately is going to come from the people to do something that ultimately may not work if China decides, we don't really want to get on board with this, right? Or India decides, we don't really want to get on board with it, because between China and India, that's about 36%, right? That's about a third, a little bit over a third of all the emissions. And you have to assume that, other countries as well too, like South Africa and Mexico and Saudi Arabia, which is oil dependent, Iran, Indonesia, you have to assume that a lot of these other countries, right, who, a lot of whom haven't had their industrial revolutions yet, okay, or they're going through it, you have to assume that a lot of these countries, they're also going to try to go carbon neutral, okay? Which I don't think is a safe assumption. I think that we're going to end up spending $50 trillion if they had it their way, and we're going to get nothing out of it, right? You're still going to have the same situation. And this is the question that should be asked to these climate extremists who are out here committing acts of violence in the name of trying to fight against climate change. People like Greta Thunberg, who actually went on The View to talk about this subject, but, she wasn't really asked about, hey, what do you actually want us to do, and is it going to work without having China on board? No. She was actually asked about her beef with Andrew Tate instead.
Right.
And Greta, speaking of platforms, infamous social media troll Andrew Tate tried to taunt you by asking for your email address so he could send you a list of the, quote, enormous emissions of his 33 cars put into the environment.
Nice.
I can't repeat your brilliant response to him on daytime TV, so people need to use their imagination, but it's now one of the most liked tweets of all time. Why are awful people like him so triggered by you?
I don't know. I mean, you would think that those kinds of people could do better off using their time in some other way. There are many, many problems in the world that we need people dealing with. But it seems like they feel so threatened, or they feel like their worldview is so threatened by people like me, climate activists and environmental activists, speaking up, that they feel like they they feel like they need to silence us and mock us and etc. But that, I think, should be seen as a positive sign, because that means that we are actually having an impact. Otherwise, they wouldn't be spending their time trolling us online.
That's right. It means you're getting into good trouble, as the late John Lewis would say.
We must remember that if we want to see real changes, we can't. If we look through history, if people who were advocating for example, social justice, if they had only used the legal methods, then we wouldn't be where we are today. For example, when it comes to racial rights and women's voting and etc. So we need to think outside the box, because this is an existential crisis.
Yeah, again, this is why I don't really give Don Lemon too much of a hard time for his sexist comment on CNN. Because, again, Greta Thunberg was praised for making a sexist comment about Andrew Tate. Okay, she made a comment about his penis. And, again, this was praised across the internet. Okay, so when women make sexist comments, you get elevated on a pedestal. If a man, even if you're gay and black, and you make a sexist comment, then, you know, you're probably about to get fired and lose your career. Okay, you see how this works? But as you heard there, Greta thinks that you should use any means necessary, even if they're not legal, aka violence, to get what you want, right? To force Western countries to go carbon neutral, okay, to fight climate change. But yet scientists can't tell us if this will actually have any effect on global temperatures, because China, right, and India may not necessarily go along with it, right? If they don't go along with it, we don't know if it's actually going to affect anything in the long run. And this is why I can't take these climate extremists seriously, because none of them are protesting China. None of them are going to China and protesting, for example, China coal, right, which is responsible for 14.3% of GHG emissions, right? China coal, 14.3%, right? Again, if you really want to reduce carbon emissions, you should probably go to China, right? If you really want to fight climate change effectively, you should probably go to China, right? Go to Xi Jinping's palace and start banging on his door and protesting there, right? But the wokes already know what would happen if they did that. They know that they would be arrested and probably thrown in jail if they tried what they try here in China, right? Vandalizing stuff, violence, destruction, staging protests in places where they're trying to build coal factories. Yeah, they're not having that in China. But again, the reality is that if the wokes want what they say they want, if they're really about that life, if this is an existential threat, it's a life and death situation, it's about saving the planet, they really should be in China, right? You really should be in China, because we can't have any conversation about how much money we should be spending or what we should be doing to reduce carbon emissions until China actually gets on board with it. Doesn't look like they are, right? In my opinion, there's no indication that China is actually going to make a serious attempt to lower their emissions. Because as you see here, the per capita CO2 emissions from China continues to go up. It's at an all-time high, right? There's no signs of it slowing down. Versus the US, as you see here, we're doing our part, right? We are lowering our CO2 emissions per capita, and it has been steadily declining over time, unlike China. So again, I want to see some of these protests go to China, but we probably won't, because the woke revolutionaries are not actually serious about this issue, right? They're more serious about making noise. They're more serious about virtue signaling. They're more serious about spending money that we don't have to promote technologies that are not efficient than they are about actually trying to solve the real problem, which is China. So let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.